Dejounte Murray had a lot of things to say about your San Antonio Spurs.
You are Locked On Spurs, your daily San Antonio Spurs podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Spurs right here on the Locked On NBA Network. I'm your host, Jeff Garcia, Spurs writer for Kings 5 San Antonio. Glad to have you back. Hey, thanks for making Locked On Spurs your first listen each and every day. Free and available wherever you get podcasts. And this episode of Locked On Spurs is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sports book of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. What are we talking about today, everybody? And welcome back. It's been a few days, but I think me and the guests, we needed some time to kind of collect our thoughts, how we're going to approach reacting to Dejounte Murray's comments regarding your San Antonio Spurs. He had a lot to say on All the Smoke podcast with Captain Steven Jackson, and from Manu Ginobili to Derek White to mind games. Yeah, he had a lot to say, and he wasn't done after that interview. He decided to have a nice little exchange with a fan. Let's go to bring him on. He is my colleague over at Kens 5 on the TV side. He is Casey Viera. Casey, welcome back to Locked On Spurs. By the way, thanks for doing that on TV the other night, that follow-up. I mean, wow, he just would not stop, would he?
Yeah. I don't know, man. And yeah, we're going to get into it. It's just, this whole thing, I feel like, is taking a bunch of strange turns and unexpected turns. And a lot of it was kind of, I don't want to say unprompted to begin with, because we knew he was going to be on a podcast with a guy who did not necessarily leave San Antonio with, the most endearing feeling. But a lot of it, and I think you could probably speak to that too, is I don't think we saw it coming. You know what I mean? It felt a little, at the same time, it felt kind of off almost. You were just kind of like, yeah.
You say that right now that many people probably didn't see. Well, you're not about seeing it coming. I kind of saw it coming, because recall when he got traded, he took a pot shot of the Spurs too, saying, what is it going to take 15 years for them to get back to relevancy? There's a lot more going on beyond, the culture. He's something to that effect on Instagram. But yeah, I mean, he definitely had a lot to say. Let's go and recap that. Make sure to follow Casey on Twitter at Casey_Viera. So if you missed it, Steven Jackson had Dejounte Murray on his podcast along with Matt Barnes, All the Smoke podcast. And I think the biggest thing that he started off with was the mind games. So according to Dejounte, he felt that Popovich, the team, were playing mind games on him, specifically about playing time, how they wouldn't alert him well ahead of time that he's not playing. And they'll tell him right then and there. And he didn't appreciate other players getting playing time ahead of him, even though, according to him, that he was cooking Tony Parker and Patty Mills in practice. He had an issue with an Argentinian player coming in and getting minutes over him being sent to the G League, and him watching all this happening. I don't know about this mind games thing. I don't know how to digest that, other than you got to earn your stripes, Dejounte, especially at an early age.
Yeah, let me rephrase the didn't see and coming part here first. Okay. I think, for me, the part I didn't see coming were as many elements that and kind of, avenues that he hit on as to why he was so frustrated. I'm not entirely surprised that he's still bothered, because, any breakup is never an easy breakup. Regardless what aspect of life it is, it's never, all breakups end with some sense of resentment in some capacity. So I wasn't entirely surprised on that front. But when I heard that interview, which for the most part, I gotta say, was a very good interview. I thought, I listened to that thing from start to finish, and I thought Steven Jackson, Matt Barnes did a great job with it. I really felt like I got a lot out of that, and you really got, you knew about Dejounte's upbringing, but you didn't know intricate details of
Right, you're right.
of his upbringing, and I thought they did a very good job of getting that out of him. My main takeaway, though, was that he sounded like a guy who was angry and bitter about the breakup, but didn't know why he was angry and bitter about the breakup. And the reason I say that is this, because he said so many, a lot of the reasons he hit on were so counterproductive and contradictive. An example, he talks about growing up in a rougher area of, of Seattle, and part of the reason his draft stock fell was that the company he kept was a little bit suspect.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It wasn't the most endearing of areas. And this guy was arrested something like 4 times before he was 15 years old, and ended up being homeschooled for the last 3 years of his high school career before going to Washington. But the way he makes it sound like was that he was a lock to be a top 10 lottery pick somewhere around there, and it wasn't until night of the draft that word started sprinkling out amongst teams, or someone was leaking to teams that, hey, be very wary of his background and his, the company he keeps, and that's the reason he fell all the way to 29. And so he kept hitting on that, which I think honestly is fair. I think that'd be a fair reason to be bothered by something. Mm-hmm. So I think he was off there. Where I think he was off, though, was that the Spurs ultimately, of course, took him. And the reason he said he was so frustrated in San Antonio while they were always butting heads was that they could never look past his background. They didn't say it out loud, but behind the scenes, they felt like his background, who he grew up with, his outside circle, was against the Spurs way. And my counterpoint to that is, well, if it was so against the Spurs way, wouldn't they have not drafted you to begin with?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. If they were so, if they were so concerned about your well-being in your second year, you wouldn't have been starting over Tony Parker. And then in the same sense, you're saying to Tony Parker, like, Tony Parker was a free agent at the time, so he didn't necessarily owe Dejounte a whole lot. It's not like the thing went down and Tony Parker demanded a trade. He was a free agent. At that point, he doesn't owe anybody anything. Tony Parker, once he's off contract, doesn't owe the Spurs a single thing. So it was things like that. Just once the interview was over, I was like, man, this is contradictive. This is he doesn't know what he didn't sound like he knew what he was really mad about. And then he'd throw things in like he didn't fit because, Derek White was a yes. Well, in his wording, he wasn't a yes man. And so they went with Derek White a lot instead of him. And it sounded like someone who was just frustrated with his time there as a whole, but really, like, I don't want to say unappreciative because I think that's a little strong, but seemed a little tone deaf as to how much he did accomplish here, which was a lot as an individual player. So it seemed a little all over the place, but the overriding thing of him being frustrated, I think that's reasonable. I think that's reasonable because I think any person in that spot would be a little bit bothered, miffed. I think that's just part of life. The road that he took to get there, I'm not exactly sure about, though.
When he brought up about being ignored by Timmy and Manu and Pop, well, he's in good company. Didn't Manu Ginobili say the exact same thing, that Tim Duncan didn't talk to him for like a long time? Tony Parker said that Tim Duncan didn't talk to him for a long time. I think that's the culture. You got to prove yourself.
Right.
And look,
I mean, Tony Parker, like we say it all the time, Tony Parker got benched for Speedy Claxton. I mean, I'm a Hofstra guy. I love me some Speedy Claxton. I don't think there's any more of a reality check, though, that you could have.
Right, yeah. And here's the thing, too, is that's just the way it was. And because Dejounte came in, I guess, towards the tail end of the Big Three era, and the Spurs were still clinging to that. And it was pretty much Tim Duncan's way, and to a lesser degree, Tony and Manu's way. at that time. So here's a kid that comes into the league with a big chip on his shoulder, and he sees how structured it is, how mechanical it is, and how they stick to what they know, the Spurs. And remember, at that time, there's not only TD and Manu and TP. Who else is there? There's LMA. There's the beginning stages of Kawhi Leonard emerging on the scene. There's other guys out there that are veterans, Patty Mills. And then he admits it himself in the interview, Casey. He says, I know there's other guys ahead of me, Tony and Patty. But when I'm listening to him, I just feel like that chip on his shoulder. And a part of me is like, I like it. That's if you're a team, he's my teammate, I want that type of edge with me.
Right.
If you're a coach, you want that player that's hungry to win and prove themselves instead of just, all right, laying back and waiting for their time. But it just comes off. And now I'm not the only one who said this. His approach to it came very whiny, very, very entitled, like he's franchised the moment he steps on an NBA court. And that's the vibe that I got. Your thoughts?
Right. You know what? Exactly. But that goes back to the contradictive part that I was just talking about, because he gets there and he's saying, nobody's really talking to him. He's playing behind Tony and Patty and Manu and all these guys. But then he makes mention in the interview, he's like, yeah, I got there and I knew I wasn't going to play. So it's like, okay, well, if you knew you weren't going to play because you were a rookie and you're playing behind a handful of future Hall of Famers, like, what the hell are you complaining about right now in 2023? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's another example of the contradiction part that I'm talking about. It just was very, like you said, it was very all over the place. And he didn't sound like a guy who knew what exactly he was mad about, but he was mad.
Yeah, he definitely was mad. And we're going to continue talking about Dejounte Murray and his thoughts on playing for the Spurs right here on Locked On Spurs with my good friend and colleague at Kens 5. He is Casey Viera. Follow him on Twitter at Casey_Viera. Hey, I want to talk to you about FanDuel. Look, the NFL playoffs are here. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sports book in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, well, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers join today to get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel has all your favorite bets from the money line to point spreads to player props. Plus, you can even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. I like it. It's going to be great now as the NFL playoffs are heating up. So, yeah, go to FanDuel right now. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So football fans, don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports book partner of the NFL. We're back right here on Locked On Spurs with Casey Viera. Follow him on Twitter at Casey_Viera and check him out. Holding down the sports desk anchor on Kens 5 TV from Thursday through Sunday. So we're talking about Dejounte Murray and his thoughts on the Spurs with the All the Smoke podcast. And Casey, you look back at that interview, and first of all, it's going to make that March game in San Antonio versus Atlanta interesting. Because fans are charged up. The fans definitely had a reaction. Majority of them was a very, anti-Dejounte. It just feels like he's just turned completely heel on the Spurs fan base. Like he pulled the WWE Hulk Hogan to NWO Hulk Hogan, Hollywood Hogan. And that's what it felt like. I begs the question. He's not the first former Spur to come out against San Antonio. I think we had text exchange about this. We're trying to list some names. There's been, my first thought was Rodman, Steven Jackson. I think you mentioned, was it Simmons? Was it you mentioned Jonathan Simmons? I don't know.
Simmons was the guy who came up, but I think Dejounte was easily the most talented to vocalize that because Kawhi Kawhi never really vocalized it.
Hmm.
That was all just kind of through the press and hearsay and stuff like that. But Kawhi never went to any platform and kind of said it to that degree how bothered he was. So probably more so than definitely in recent memory. Dejounte was probably the best player to go out and vocalize that. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I think no, I know. Former coach Bob Hill did take shots at the Spurs organization, specifically Popovich, obviously,
Yeah.
for booting him out of the coaching job. But it's very rare you see that. But when they do come out, it comes out, and DeJounte wasn't done. Afterwards, on Instagram, he had an interesting exchange with a fan saying how it's going to be tough to root for DeJounte now. DeJounte just laid in, and shockingly, everybody, he didn't delete it. That's why every time DeJounte tweets something or puts something on Instagram, make sure you screenshot it, because more than likely 2 minutes later he'll delete it. But he left this one there. This one felt a little more ominous.
Yeah.
Same old, you don't have to root for me if you don't want to. Only real fans. He has this thing with real fans. He always talks about that. But he said, if I talked about just 95% of what I know, the fan base will second guess their fandom for the Spurs. Yikes. Your thoughts on that?
I mean, again, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised, because if we're being honest, like, this kind of started even when he was here. And when he gets on these conversations about real fans, you don't have to support me. You don't know what's really going on, things like that. Like, remember a couple of years ago where they lost at home and they got booed, and he went up there in the post game and he said, we don't want the support from the fake fans, things like that. So, I mean, in that respect, this is still very on brand for him, because he's always had that same energy the entire time.
Right.
But I think it's just more of the same. I think it's more of the same. You're just sitting there and you're wondering what it was that triggered this whole thing, what it's become for, or what the whole thing has been turned into, what it's become, because it's so much of it's just like off base. The conversation that he has, that he's publicized and he's gone out and said, he made it sound like he was at Kawhi's level of talent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he was an all-star once, of all-star reserve on a team that was in the play-in game, and in the play-in game he played miserably. So it feels like it's an off sense of as to, and I respect him for valuing his abilities, but the idea that there's this ground that he can, holier than thou mentality to stand on, it just feels off base, because there hasn't really been a whole lot of much accomplishment yet on his career for him to take some of the stances that he's taking. Like, the Spurs trading a guy in his, think about it just on the surface, behind the scenes stuff. This guy had a career year last year, entering a stretch where he's going at where, after he got extended but staying on the same trajectory, he's easily going to get, a 9-figure contract in a few years. So he ends up in a situation that's not favorable for the franchise. So after they had already extended him, despite his injury, they do good by him again and sent him to what people thought was a contender in a better situation where he is, a situation to express himself a little bit more. And largely the sentiment is still negative, to the degree that you have to go out there and the extent that you have to go out there and broadcast it. It's just more of the same. And just kind of it just kind of goes back to the general idea of, I don't know what he's mad about, because all the things he's mad about are all things like Spurs doing good on him on the way out.
Yeah, and here's the thing.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and here's the thing too. Popovich felt enough trust in him to give him the starting job over Tony Parker. Now, granted, Tony was already on his last legs, and I get that. They got to do the shift. We saw that from Avery Johnson or Antonio Daniels, excuse me, to Tony Parker. Tim Duncan had to go through it. He had to, when he needed to kind of preserve his shelf life, it became the Tony Parker show. Then became the Monty and Tony Parker show. And David Robinson had to take a back seat. David freaking Robinson to Tim Duncan. This is just the natural progress of NBA teams, that when there's an up-and-coming talent, you guide them in. Now, I do agree with you. I think Dejounte was wrong for saying that Tony Parker had to mentor him. I don't think that. I'm pretty sure you look in Tony's contract at the time, there's not a clause that says you must mentor your backup point guard. I don't think,
especially when he's not even under contract.
Right, and he's not under contract. Thank you. So you see the Spurs, hyping him up, the all-star, all defensive team. And what he went through at a young stage, I mean, he was to the point saying, like, to this day, I still don't know why they messed with my mind like that. It just feels like a guy who just hasn't really been challenged. Like, things have been given to him. Like, I don't know how to say it. I feel like entitled. I think you said it earlier, like the entitlement.
I think entitled. Yeah. I think it's in a false sense of entitlement. I think it's a big sense of immaturity. I think those are probably the two overriding sentiments.
And it doesn't help that you have Captain Jack egging you on.
Another guy. I mean, that is true. I mean, that is very much true. And also a good point. Yeah, he did not make the situation any better. And yes, he did egg him on.
No, let's be very fair. Now, in the same interview, Dejounte was complimentary towards the Spurs. He did say that they are, in his viewpoint, they are greatness. He did say that. He did give a shout out to Manu Ginobili, saying that was one of the best teammates he's had, and Steven Jackson did so too.
He did say that. That's right.
Yeah. He even put Tim Duncan on his Dejounte, that is, on his top 5 players of all time in NBA history. So, again, he did have complimentary stuff. And then in a now deleted tweet, again, I don't know why this one you showed it to me. Didn't he kind of follow it up on Twitter saying that he was thankful and grateful of his time with San Antonio? But why would he delete that? That's good for him to put out there.
Yeah. And that's kind of what's also very strange too, is that he's saying all these things and then he's doubling down on them and then he's deleting them. What? Like it's already It's already out. Like the toothpaste's already out of the tube here. You went on this podcast and said all these things. It honestly doesn't really matter if you double down at this point. You change the whole fan base's perspective of you. We're kind of past the point of deleting a tweet would make things a little bit or a lot of it better, and then and fix stuff. So, I mean, I wasn't exactly entirely sure with that.
But the one on Instagram, the one that you reported on the TV side of things at Ken's 5, that's still up. So it's like, I don't know, maybe he is pulling a WWE and just embracing the heel turn. And you see that, he could be just embracing it, but
he might be.
It's just so interesting. But when we get back, I'm going to ask Casey if that was the straw that broke the fandom's back. Is that it? Is he now, Dejounte Murray, on the public enemy list? Right here on Locked On Spurs with Casey Viera. Follow him on Twitter at Casey_Viera. We're back right here on Locked On Spurs with Casey Viera, my colleague at Kens5.com, and we're reacting to Dejounte Murray's comments to Steven Jackson, Matt Barnes on the All the Smoke podcast. So, as we mentioned earlier, Casey, Spurs and Hawks will be playing in March. First time in San Antonio. That'll be Dejounte's first time back in San Antonio. So you have post-trade comments, 15 years. real fans during his time here, and then you have the interview with Captain Jack. You think that's enough already now that he is now on that public enemy list among the fandoms, like your Kawhi Leonards, your Marcus Morris, your Joey Crawfords, your Mark Cubans?
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
Really? I was okay. I honestly was not expecting you to say that. I thought you were going to say no.
No, I do. Mainly because people are very much prisoners of the moment, and in time it'll change. But as you kind of see very frequently when it comes to the Spurs and it comes to Spurs fans and people talking down on their team, it is a very, 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 very fine line one skeptic can toe, where you're not going to trigger the fan base. Probably more so. It's a very defensive fan base, if we're being honest here. I'm going to go on. I'll go out and say it all the way. I was trying to dance around very defensive, but I'll say it all the way. It's a fan base that gets very defensive. So when you say things like he did, when he says stuff like, I still have love for the fans, but 95% of the stuff you're hearing, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. They don't care. They don't care. They don't care if all of a sudden it turns to, oh yeah, I hate the team, but I still love you. They don't care at that point. Like it doesn't matter at that point. They're just so enamored with the franchise that it's anytime that you're towing that line and you're going after their team, they don't care. And I think he's going to get booed. I think he's going to get booed out of the building the night of. I really do.
I'm right there with you. I thought I was going to be the one on between you and me to say that he is going to get the business from the fans, but yeah, I think he's already done enough already. I think this last incident or this last chat with Jackson and Barnes that did it. I think you would have heard like a little bit of boos maybe if fans remembered about the post-trade remarks he said about the 15 years to get back to relevancy. But you add that, and that was brought up again, and then you got what he said. But I also want to get your thoughts on this, is that afterwards he did say that was just his truth, that what he perceived, his opinion. And he in that same Instagram post that you mentioned on Cans 5 TV and what I did on the digital side, he said that he felt, in his opinion, he felt that he didn't say anything bad. How do you interpret that? Because fans see, I see it as not good. I mean, you don't call out Derek White, your guy that was your boy, when y'all were playing in San Antonio, and then say like, well, he's just a yes man. You don't, and then, to me that's bad. You don't say
no,
on Instagram like
out loud. Yeah. I laughed out loud at that part. I was like, hold on. He's like, the reason he chose Derek White is because, I wasn't a yes man. But I love Derek. But there's no other way around that. No, it's not like if he chose above you, if Pop chose someone else over you because he prefers someone who's a yes man, or that would be you saying that Derek White is a yes man.
He's a yes man. Yes.
Yeah. What am I missing here?
I just think maybe it's coming out wrong for him. Like maybe he could have worded everything differently. Maybe he could have said, in my opinion, I felt like I was being brainwashed or whatever he said, the mind games.
Right.
Versus, no, they brainwashed me. No, they mind game. I don't understand. And then he just backs it up with the whole, yeah, I get it that Patty and Tony are ahead of me, but I'm cooking them in practice. And they couldn't see that. Why do you bring in an Argentinian guy, a guard, while I'm in the G League? You could have played, that. Again, it just felt, again, perhaps, or even he could have set this up too this way, Casey, saying, look, when I was younger, a young 19-year-old kid coming into the NBA, this is how my 19-year-old mind was thinking.
Right.
But they didn't. It just felt like whatever those feelings just still are lingering, as you mentioned. Like, why is he mad? Nobody knows why. Because if it wasn't for his success in San Antonio, I mean, just look at the deal. Look at what Atlanta gave up to get a player like him.
Yeah.
So that's a reflection on him. Just have another NBA team saying, "Hey, we think you're so good. We want you on our team. We're going to give San Antonio we're going to pay that sticker price, and we want you." I would think that he would see that as a compliment, Casey.
That's what makes it all so confusing, man. That's what makes it all so, like, that's what makes this whole thing so confusing. Because you think of all the things that he got bothered about, these are things that the Spurs looked past. The Spurs looked past his background.
Mm-hmm.
The Spurs stayed loyal to him when he tore his ACL and gave him a $64 million extension. The Spurs gave him, I mean, the Spurs could have passed that up entirely and be like, nope, you're going to enter a restricted free agency and we'll see how much you're really worth, buddy. No, they showed faith in him then. They showed faith in him when they traded DeMar DeRozan, and they made him the focal point of their offense, of their team. Mm-hmm. So it's like, what are we missing here? Yeah. What are we missing?
Yeah.
It's just so, and the reason we're missing it is because, we weren't there. We didn't see 95% of the things that went on behind the scenes. Well, I mean, if 95% of the things that went on behind the scenes and you still think you were slighted, it must have been really bad. Mm-hmm. Really bad to the point that it's unprecedented of something that we've heard here in San Antonio.
Yeah,
and the reason you're skeptical is because that largely, for the most part, hasn't ever happened.
Yeah, and then plus too, for the Spurs fans to react the way they did. Now, again, to be fair as well, there were a segment of Spurs fans that did agree with Dejounte that they weren't bashing him. They weren't bashing him as the majority of Spurs fans were. But again, if you put it on a weight, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but
that's okay.
I do think that it's entirely in his right to be bothered.
Yeah,
it is in his right to be bothered, to feel frustrated about a breakup, that things maybe didn't go as ideally as you wanted. I do think that's fair, because I think that's human. But the way he's expressing it, it's just very off base. And it just, again, it sounds like a guy who doesn't know what he's mad about. Because it doesn't make sense. Everyone who looks at what he's saying, they're like, dude.
Yeah.
What? But it's okay. He can be mad, but we're not getting the real rationale why. If you want, like, the 95%, the things he says, 95% of the things you don't want to hear, well, if you come out and you say any of those 95%, if you're really, really willing to double down here, do it.
Yeah. I mean,
and that'll get people will really be able to use their assumption of this whole, evaluate this whole thing. If you go out there and say it, because the stuff that you're putting out there right now, you're not you don't look good. You don't look good. But if you go out there and you air something that we don't know, okay.
Yeah, and again, you look at the interview, and as we're trying to be fair to the fan base, like, because the overwhelming majority were biting back at Dejounte when there was that segment that were supporting him and felt that he's just speaking his truth, what he perceives. So there's that segment, but you also combine this too. Historically, and you could correct me on this, there really hasn't been that type of drama off the court from San Antonio. The Kawhi is the most recent one as far as trying to get out. I mean, LaMarcus Aldridge did try to get out early in his career too, but LaMarcus never disparaged the team after he left to Brooklyn.
And again, it couldn't have been that. It couldn't have been that bad because he re-signed.
Yeah, he re-signed. Yeah. Again, the Rodman is perhaps another one that really blew up off the court. But yeah, I mean, so this so rare. But what I'm trying to get at is the fan base is not used to this coming from their favorite NBA team. This type of drama, and he's not even a Spur anymore. But yeah, I mean, you got to think too for Dejounte. You know, you're pumping yourself up to be, you know, a player that, you know, you're a good player, Dejounte. But then you look at Atlanta and they're in shambles right now. So there it is. Yeah, but hey, we're done talking. I mean, there's just so much to unpack for this interview that we cannot do everything all at once in this episode. But we definitely want to hear your opinion on this. Where do you stand with Dejounte Murray's interview with All the Smoke podcast? You can let Casey know on Twitter at Casey_Viera. And Casey, what's going on the Ken's 5 TV sports side of things?
The usual. You know, it's going to die down a little bit now that the Cowboys are done. Well, that front.
By the way, I have to apologize to Casey. I thought he was all things New York, like all things New York sports. You know, because I know he loves his Knicks, and you're a Yankees fan, correct? Did I get that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I knew that. So I just lumped those two together, thinking, okay, he's just, you know, he's from the East Coast, the New York area. I get that, you know, Giants.
Yeah.
You're not a Giants fan. You're actually a Raiders fan.
I'll be honest. I can't stand the Giants.
Really?
Can't stand the Giants.
Why is that?
I don't like them because I don't. You want to know what it is? I don't like the fan base. I don't like the fan base. I don't. The fan base I grew up with in the Northeast. It was such a. It's a group that has a very much. You're talking about false sense of reality. It was a false sense of reality. You know, Brandon Jacobs, as far as they were concerned growing up, that was the second coming of Walter Payton. Yeah, I mean, it's a very off base, out of touch with reality fan base, and as a result, they just did not make them very likable growing up, to me at least. And so I kind of watched that. I was like, well, I don't want to be associated with those people. The Jets aren't very good. I kind of live close to Philly, but they were always kind of in the drama with negative press, and T.O. was always, you know, stirring the pot a little bit. So I'm like, you know what? I like the Raiders. They're a bunch of cool looking dudes. They're
silver and black. They're silver and black too.
Yeah, they're silver and black. You know, I like that culture. I'm a big hip hop fan, so that's cool as well. And I jumped on that bandwagon a little bit, and it made the Super Bowl. And after that, it's just been, you know, basically 20 years of mediocrity.
Yeah. I've lived in the New York area for a while now, and I've never been to a Giants game. I've been to a Jets game, but I've never been to a Giants game. I think I can count on the hand how many times I've been to Giants Stadium. It's for a Jets game and for a U2 concert. Bono.
Okay. By the way, can we talk about how much they butchered MetLife Stadium?
Oh my God! First of all, for those of y'all who've never been to the MetLife Stadium, it's like in the middle of nowhere, like a big open field.
Yeah, the Meadowlands, the swamp.
Yes, the swamp.
Yep. They had the world in their hands 10 years ago building that thing. They had the world in their hands, and they built some glorified AC unit.
And getting there,
that's what it looks like.
Well, no, you're right. You're right. It does. When you drive up, you're like, hey, look, somebody's giant AC is just put here in the middle of an open swamp. But getting to MetLife Stadium, now, mind you, maybe it's hard for y'all to conceptualize as you lived in New York, like JC and I have. But New York, you don't really need a car. Casey can vouch for that. I can vouch for that. You don't need one. It's pointless. You're dumb if you get one, in my opinion. You're just wasting money. So you're thinking, yay, because they have the greatest transit system ever. Getting to MetLife Stadium sucks.
Oh,
it's the worst.
With the train on game day, there's always
issues. And they're packed and they're crowded. And you try to like get all creative because yes, New Yorkers try to get creative getting to places. And you think you're on a right path, and then you realize like it's the same crap. It's the same issues, the same everything. Like, oh, I'm gonna take a bus from Penn Station to go to Meadowlands. That's a chore. Oh, I'm gonna go to Newark. I'm gonna go from Grand Central Penn Station to Newark, and then Newark to it's the mess. And then when you get there, everybody, you still have like a walking to do. So it's really tough to get to. But this Locked On Spurs,
I'll be reasonable. I feel like most Jets and Giants fans, they're not a fan of the stadium either. So if you go up and be like, yeah, the new MetLife Stadium, it kind of sucks. They're like, yeah, no.
Yeah.
It's all those things you just said, Jeff.
Yeah, exactly.
Why.
Yeah.
It's an ugly stadium.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pain to get
and the food is not good.
Above all else, if you can't enjoy your dining experience at a football game, why are you even going?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and of course I go to a Jets game. Yay! So we're done talking again, everybody. We want to hear from you. We told you how to get a hold of Casey on Twitter at Casey_Viera. Get a hold of me on Twitter at Jeff G Spurzone. And we thank you for making Locked On Spurs your first listen each and every day. Again, free and available wherever you get podcasts. Second listen, check out Locked On Game to Game NBA. All you need to know about the NBA on Game to Game. Available everywhere on the Odyssey app, YouTube page. Pick a platform. Same with Locked On Spurs. Pick a platform. Ken's 5 Plus app, the YouTube page, and much, much more. So for Casey Viera, I am Jeff Garcia. We're putting a lock on this episode of Locked On Spurs.